Hey everybody, welcome to episode 77 of the Go Get Outside podcast. This is your host, Jason Milligan. Welcome back, welcome aboard. On today's show, we will be speaking to a person that should be recognized by many people in the American canyoneering community. We'll be speaking with Tom Jones. He is the owner and creator of Imlay Canyon Gear. It is quite likely if you have any canyoneering-specific gear, be it a backpack, be it a rope, a fiddle stick, or any number of other pieces of specialty gear, it is possible that some, if not all of that gear, has come from Imlay Canyon Gear. But not only does Tom create gear for the canyoneering community, he is also the author of the Zion Canyoneering Guidebook. So if you have ever run a canyon in Zion National Park, it is quite possible you used that beta to help you descend that canyon. Tom and I spoke last summer at Imlay headquarters, aka his house in Mount Carmel, Utah. And we talked about a number of things, everything from his history as a climber, his time at Black Diamond, creating Imlay Canyon Gear, his time guiding through Zion Canyons, and his mission to correct the confused people on Facebook.
I'm Tom Jones, and I'm a canyoneer, basically meaning I'm a canyoneer pretty much full-time. I have a business selling canyoneering equipment, and I try and get out a fair amount. I've written a guidebook for Zion National Park, which a lot of people seem to like.
And we are here in your backyard in Mount Carmel, right? Is that how they say it? Say Mount Carmel?
Mount Carmel.
I feel like in Utah, everything is pronounced differently than how you think it would be pronounced.
Correct. The geologic layer was first described here, and that's the Carmel layer. But this is Mount Carmel.
Right. Makes total sense. Just like the weather entity known as the hurricane is a town here known as Hurricane.
Hurricane.
Oh, sorry, Hurricane. I'll work on my Utah pronunciation.
Utah-ism.
Yeah, it's a good thing I've got you here so you can set me straight.
Yeah.
So we're sitting here in Mount Carmel in your backyard with your chickens walking around. We are at the official Imlay Canyon Gear headquarters, right? Would you call it that?
Yes.
Yeah, I saw a sign outside that says you are an authorized dealer.
I am an authorized dealer. We are the largest manufacturer of canyoneering equipment in the United States, and I also have one employee.
Nice.
So
I saw her doing a lot of work.
Here.
Yeah, I saw her working while you were
She's the
entertaining.
one that works, yeah. She gets things out the door.
So you told me that you are recovering today because you did Imlay Canyon and got back at 1 in the morning. And for those that don't know, it's 10 a.m. right now.
Yeah.
So you probably didn't get a full night's sleep.
I did get 6 hours of sleep.
Okay.
It was great.
All right. So is that a full night for you?
Not usually, but...
Well, I appreciate you agreeing to do the show regardless.
The body also hurts today, so it's good to get out of bed, get some coffee, get some food. We did Imlay yesterday. Imlay's very full because we had a whole bunch of thunderstorms. Very full, which made some parts of it slower and some parts of it faster. And it was so different than I've seen it before. It was a fantastic day, but yeah, 5:30 a.m. to 9:30. That's a long day.
PM he means, till 9:30 p.m. So tell people, unless they have your guidebook handy and they want to pop it open and take a look, tell people what they need to know about Imlay Canyon and why it took you so long to get through there.
A couple reasons. One reason is that the main trail that we usually use to do the short version of Imlay washed out in this big storm, so it's closed. So we had to drive around to the top and hike in from the top, and then you do the upper portion of the canyon also, which we don't usually do. And that was very nice and filled with water. Imlay's noted for its keeper potholes, which are potholes that are not full of water, so they're hard to get out of. But now everything's completely full of water, so we didn't have any problems with that, which made the lower part of the canyon significantly faster. But it's much slower to wade through hip-deep water than it is to walk. There's a lot of sections where you would usually walk, and it was waist-deep water.
Which, considering the temperatures around here, maybe was preferable?
It definitely made that section a lot more pleasant. Imlay is also usually quite cold, but since the water came in recently in these thunderstorms, the water was not particularly cold, so it was nice to do Imlay and not get super cold. which is pretty normal to get really cold.
Are you cold right now, Tom?
It's so pleasant here right now. It's just great.
So what most people know you for is Imlay Canyon Gear, which, as you said, is the largest manufacturer of canyoneering-specific gear in the U.S., and also because of your guidebook, which is basically the guidebook on all of the technical canyons and non-technical canyons in the Zion region of Utah. I personally know that I have had this told to me multiple times. I've stopped at Zion Adventure Company before for various reasons. They were going to shuttle me somewhere for something or whatever. And one morning we were worried about weather. I think we were going to do mystery that morning. And when we went in to see if it was feasible to run it, because it had rained all night, and see if they knew what the conditions are, they said, well, let's check Tom's book. And then that's where this conversation began. Tell us about how Tom Jones was first little Tom Jones and then grew up into Big Tom Jones, who now has a canyoneering company and has become an expert, if he's okay with me saying that, of the canyons in this region.
I was a climber for 20 years or so.
Really?
A rock climber.
Really?
Age 17 or whatever. I think of myself as being a fantastically good climber for someone with no natural talent.
Great. Wait, so where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Boston.
Okay, so you weren't climbing there.
Oh, yeah, I was climbing.
Really?
There's plenty of climbing there.
Near Boston?
Yeah. After college, I moved to Boulder, Colorado, center of the climbing universe. I had a business there for a while, drove it into the ground twice.
Congratulations. Maybe one day you can be a senator or a president or something along those lines.
And then got a job at Black Diamond in Ventura, California, and moved out there, worked for Black Diamond for 12 years as a product designer. And then we had what I call a mutual disagreement about my working there.
So you got booted out of Black Diamond is what you're saying.
But I really didn't want to be there at that point.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. I've been there before, where you work for a business, you're ready to go. You need to convince them that they're ready to let you go.
And that, having a regular paycheck, that's a good thing. That feels really good and hard to give up. And then I more or less started this company then, and it didn't actually pay the bills. So I lived off credit cards for 2 years. Back when they used to throw credit cards at you.
Right, yeah.
And this business started to pick up just as I was going underwater on the credit card. So the timing worked out phenomenally well. I did have 6 months of eating nothing but ramen, but got really into canyoneering. We have a great community of canyoneers. When people show up that look like they're going to kill themselves, we rope them into our community.
Which is daily?
Well, sorry. When they look like they're going to kill themselves and they have talent, then we rope them into our little community. The internet has really transformed canyoneering in a very good way, at least for the first 10 years, because before that, canyoneers had no contact with each other. So there was no canyoneering community. But I started when the internet was fresh. We built a community out of using the internet, using chat groups and websites and all that. It's also that thing where you bring fresh blood in and you learn new things. People say, well, why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? So there was a lot of innovation in how we go through canyons in that time period, and somewhat more recently with anchor kind of things, anchor tricks. It seemed like a guidebook for Zion really needed to get written because it was growing in popularity. I come from a climbing background, and guidebooks are an important way of passing on knowledge to people coming into the community. You want to tell them what the ethic is, where the climbs are. That's what people come to the guidebook for. But a lot of what a guidebook does is it tells people what the ethic of the community is.
Right, what's acceptable to do in that area, whether you're allowed to place bolts, whether you need to remove your gear yourself, or whether you could bang in some pitons on certain routes, and where you need to take a crap.
It's still an important thing. And one of the problems with having information internet-based is that people don't buy the book. They go to the website, they get the information they were looking for. That community forming information doesn't get in front of them. I have a lot of people canyoneering that are not enrolled in the canyoneering community ethic. Then you have rescues, and you have crap, and you have shitty anchors, and you have all this stuff.
We're going to get back to all that stuff, but what has really surprised me about this conversation so far is I had no idea that at any point you were a climber. In my head, you have always been part of the canyoneering community. You've helped establish canyons in the area, and when you were born, somebody slid you into a canyon harness and pushed you out of the door. But apparently that's not true. So what brought you to climbing first? And I'm assuming you didn't even know canyoneering was a sport at that time when you were 17 or so and started climbing.
I would not say that canyoneering was a sport in 1974 when I graduated from high school. But climbing was definitely a sport. Mm-hmm. And I had friends that climbed. In high school, I was every other weekend hiker in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And part of it is you come to Utah, you're hardcore into the outdoors. The thing is the desert's fantastic and you wander around for a while and then you go, if we had ropes, we could keep going on this thing. And well, I got some ropes at home. I should bring them down to the desert and get them all dirty. And thankfully, at that point, I only did canyons that were forgiving enough that I could actually get out of them. Canyoneering really only took off in the U.S. with the internet. There were small groups doing stuff all the way back to the 50s. They weren't interacting. They weren't publishing. One of the big pioneers back then was Dennis Turville. He wants to be recognized as a pioneer, but he made a point of not publishing anything because he didn't want the masses coming to it, which is part of the problem we have now is the masses come to it and have no idea what they're doing and bumble their way through, hopefully. We had 2 rescues in the subway last week with people that got advice from the rangers. Oh, you need ropes for this. And they say, oh, we've done it before. We didn't need ropes. And they get down to the final little section there, and there used to be logs that let you get to the other side of the canyon.
Right, yeah.
And those washed out a couple years ago. So now you need to rappel from that side of the canyon, and there's no way to hop down like there is on the other side. Mm-hmm. So they ended up getting rescued by the rangers.
Subway is an interesting place because it's barely technical. You could almost call it non-technical. It has a few technical spots, but because of that, people think they can go through. I can tell you a really quick story years ago where I and my friend Carl, we were scouting that canyon to bring a larger group the next year, and we ended up rescuing 10 college students because when they were told at the registration desk, they had to have you fill out all that paperwork saying that you have rope and a rappel device and a carabiner and a harness and a length of webbing. Well, they had one of each of those items and 10 people, and none of them had ever learned to use any of them. And at one point, they were just in the canyon with us, and we realized they have no idea what to do. And so we had to carry them through the entire canyon. The one thing that they did do intelligently is 2 of the girls were afraid of water. So they had brought life vest for those 2 girls. So they did have 2 life vests, but 1 harness among 10 people.
It's pretty usual in the subway for experienced people to go through, pick up people to put in their group to carry them through, show them how to rappel. Having a group of 10 people with only 1 harness is pretty ordinary. We have people that show up, they're waiting for the rappel, and they realize these people only have 1 harness. It's like, okay, we have a bunch of harnesses, let's get you people rigged up. But one of the unfortunate things is the least competent people also tend to be the slowest. So they end up being the last group that goes through the canyon.
Right, which means no one's behind to help them if they get in trouble. So you grew up in Boston. You got into climbing because climbing was a thing, but canyons weren't yet. You go to Black Diamond. You go to California. How did you say you ended up in Utah?
Well, the whole company moved out
when Black Diamond moved.
Salt Lake City in 1991. One of the things about being a climber without a lot of talent is I kind of hit the ceiling of 511A. And I climbed at that level for like 10 years. And it was like, I'm getting bored of this. Most of my friends are having kids, went from being once-a-week climbers to once-a-month to once-a-year climbers. The people that climbed more, especially in the company, were climbing 512s and 513s, and it's like, not up for that.
Although I got to say 11A is not bad. I'm not an 11A. I'm not an 11A climber. I wouldn't mind being an 11A climber.
I wouldn't mind being an 11A climber again.
Were you just climbing everything? Were you doing multi-pitch, sport?
You would say I was a trad climber, but probably, as you and most of your listeners know, trad climbers these days probably do sport climbing 3/4 of the time. And it's great because it makes you strong, which makes it much easier to place gear if you're strong. Let's see, I went to Mount McKinley to find out that altitude is not my thing, but my partner summited. Did a little ice climbing, but that usually involves being really strong, and I'm not. Mostly trad, long routes. Reasonable long routes was really what I really liked, but cragging and kind of the whole thing.
And then at some point you start deciding to explore what's beneath you, instead of what's above you.
Well, did I mention I broke my back?
You didn't mention that.
I flew a paraglider into a hill.
All right, why did you have a paraglider? How did you get a paraglider?
I was training on paragliding. I was an advanced beginner, which is, as we know, is a very dangerous place to be. And my instructor gave me a task to do.
I'm assuming the task was not fly into a cliffside?
That was not part of the plan.
Okay.
And it had an inadvertent launch. I hadn't planned to launch to get into the air, and I found myself flying through the air backwards, flew for a little ways, and then smacked into the hill. I broke my back, so we pulled me off the hill. We stuck me in the back of the trooper. I was able to hold myself with my arms on the seatbelts on the back seat and hold myself in traction, basically. And then we drive to the hospital, which is 20 minutes away. They open the back of the thing and they say, yeah, I'll hop on out. And I'm like, no. Bring the gurney and the backboard.
Yeah, right.
And they wheel me into the ER and do the x-ray thing and do the MRI thing. And then they ship me up to the good hospital in the middle of the city, which conveniently was half a mile from my house. Then spent 10 days in the hospital, and they rebuilt me with a piece of bone from the bone bank and some titanium plates. Then you get 6 months on the couch, enhanced by a little morphine every day for the first 3 months and a lot of time to think.
I would think a dangerous time to think is when you're pumped full of morphine. Reflect back on your life when you're pumped full of morphine.
Well, except you're not pumped full of morphine. You're just taking these little
that's
morphine
right.
pills.
I guess that's true.
So,
they're not just sitting there injecting you every
right.
few hours.
That's in the hospital.
Right.
Yeah, the mind went some pretty bizarre places for those couple of days, being pumped full of that super powerful drug, the fentanyl, because the morphine only works for a couple of days, and then they have to switch to something more powerful. Thankfully, they're doing it in a hospital where they control the dose very well.
Right.
But in that time, I thought about what I really like to do, which was really wander around in the desert and enjoy the landscape. And there's some guidebooks out at that time. Steve Allen's guidebooks have this great thing. He doesn't go into technical canyoneering, but he has these places where he says, and the canyon is impassable from that point. So that gets a big highlight on it. And then you go talk with your friends at Black Diamond. Hey, let's go check this out, see if we can get down this. That kind of became my new focus. Partly I was paragliding because I was bored with climbing and was looking for something new to do.
And then you're like, to hell with this.
Yeah. This doesn't seem to be the right sport for me. So I got into the canyoneering and super enjoyed it. And then we built this little community and we found other friends. And some guy I knew back in Boulder 15 years ago got into canyoneering. We're like, oh, that's great. He connected me with these other people and it just became a great community.
Yeah, let's talk about how that developed. You're coming from a climbing background at this point, and I imagine a lot of the other people you're meeting are coming from similar backgrounds. They're either hikers or climbers or both, and you're kind of taking climbing techniques into the canyons, which for any of us that do canyons, we know those have developed to be canyon-specific techniques. So what did that look like in the beginning? Were you wrapping off figure eights, using dynamic rope, carrying Climber Pro with you in case it was necessary, or not at all? Just figuring it out as you went?
I think probably carried some Climber Pro a couple of times. I was fortunate that following Steve Allen's Swell guidebook, the canyons there, the technical parts are not necessarily all that technical. And the first canyon I looked at was called Knotted Rope Canyon. And the great thing about that canyon is it's very technical and it doesn't have any rappels. So it was all about getting across these potholes. And I had a couple months to think about, okay, when I come back here, how are we going to get across those potholes? What are we going to do? I figured out a solution, which we didn't do. There were a bunch of pipes in there from the mining days. So there were 10-foot sections of 1-inch steel pipe that had been brought down to the canyon. And you could use those to lay them across the pothole and then hand over hand across that and hop out the other side.
So it's like monkey bars.
Yeah. I'm officially a mechanical engineer. That's what I got my degree in. So I'm really into problem solving. And I always like the problem solving aspect of climbing, both the physical and the protection and all that. But canyoneering has an enormous amount of problem solving. So it's been a great place to stimulate the mind and figure things out and even figure out new gear. I had the advantage working for Black Diamond that I could go into the returns department and say, I need some ropes. And they would just hand me these ropes that people had returned.
Those sound like the safest of ropes.
You know, I'd chew them up in a couple weekends and I'd come back for more. But, you know, we started in 1999 Part of being on the couch was I learned how to code HTML. So I put up a little website and people found that and then emailed me and said, oh, let's go do something. So that's kind of how I developed partners for canyoneering, other than all the climbers at Black Diamond who would do one canyon with me and consider that enough.
What kind of gear were you designing when you were at Black Diamond?
Through my time there, I was pretty much responsible for everything that was sewn in one way or the other.
So then Imlay being a place where you can buy rope bags and backpacks, that makes a lot of sense then. That's a kind of a natural transition for you.
My profession is as a product designer of technical sewn things. Mm-hmm. So that's the easy part. Usually only get to do it 5 days a year.
So what made you decide to start offering the Imlay products? Was it because you started to need specific gear that didn't exist? Was it because you thought it could be profitable? Was it both?
Originally, I was making stuff for myself. And then once you develop that, kind of natural for me to be in business in some way. I went to go get some avalanche probe poles from our production department because I could pull up on the computer and see that they had 600 probe poles in discontinued merchandise. So I went to Ken, the purchaser, and said, yeah, I'd like to get 20 of these poles to make a long stick, put a hook on it, and you can use that to get out of potholes, which kind of worked. And he said, yeah, I can't sell you 20. You need to take them all. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And he said, 10 cents on the dollar. And I was like, okay, I'll take them all. I still have some.
Nice.
When I was in Boulder, I had my own company making climbing gear called J-Rat, but I didn't really understand how the whole business making a profit thing worked. Mm-hmm. I knew how to make stuff, but not how to make money making stuff. So Black Diamond was great because Black Diamond is a well-run small company, and as a designer, I needed to understand a lot of things about how the company makes money. So I got a very good training in how to run a business and actually have it make money, which is a good thing.
I mean, it's a good way for a business to stay in business.
Yeah.
Businesses that don't make money don't tend to stick around very long.
I like getting a paycheck every day, even if I have to write it myself.
So what was the very first Imlay Canyon Gear product?
Well, the first was this hook on top of an 11-foot pole.
So that was indeed it.
That was called the Happy Hooker. And the thought was you could swim to the other side of a keeper pothole and stick that hook on something. With a little experience, you learn, there's nothing to stick that hook on. It worked reasonably well in Imlay Canyon, where there was a bolted anchor at the end of the pothole for the next pothole. So you could reach up and hook the webbing on the bolted anchor. There's a couple other places where it worked, but of course, it was this great toy for people to buy. So I think they were like $60, which is just like the limit of something that people can just buy because it's cool. Truthfully, it was a real pain to manufacture because it had a couple specially made parts. I found a machinist to make me this part to fit in, and then there was a lot of hand polishing to get the whole thing to work.
So your first product is a product you don't offer anymore. To a certain degree, it's kind of a failed product, right?
Yeah.
We could call it that. And it's not a sewn good product, which is your specialty.
Yeah.
So when you decided to take your own business venture into canyoneering gear, you said, well, let me focus on the area of engineering that isn't my expertise first and create this product.
I was making some things for myself and a couple friends, some packs and the pot shots throw bag. But because I had to buy those 600 avalanche probe poles, then okay. We kind of need to do something with this. Okay, we'll make that into a product. And partly because it's an attractive toy. So that would mean that people would actually buy it. Mm-hmm. So the first 2 years of the business, I was the person who was sewing the packs. And I am not a person who can sit down at a sewing machine for 8 hours and make things. I sit down for 45 minutes and then I'm like, I'm really bored. I need to go do something else.
Oh, so you're saying you're ADD.
I call it adult onset ADD. It's also that you need to go through those first 2 years of refining the designs and figuring out what people want and what's going to sell. And then you can look for a contractor to do it. And one of the great things about working for Black Diamond is that I worked with a sewing contractor in the Philippines, and they offered to make my gear for me. My year's supply of gear was roughly the size of Black Diamond's sample order. But, they were tolerant of me for 5 years, and they did a great job for me. And then they said, Tom, we were hoping you would turn into a $10 million company in this time. Apparently that hasn't happened, and we're going to have to not make your stuff for you. So then I had to find a factory that was interested in making my rather small $60,000 orders. And at that time period, things were going great guns in China, and waving $60,000 around just didn't get anybody's interest. So it took me 2 years to find another factory. I finally complained to the right person who knew someone who knew someone who knew a factory I could probably get into.
So what happened in those 2 years to your product? Did you start making it your own again, or did you just have a shortage of product?
I just had a shortage of product. Ropes also are a very important part of my business.
Right. So how'd the ropes come about? You had connections to the Philippines originally, and then you found someone in China to help with sewing the packs and things. Was it also Black Diamond contacts that helped you get set up with ropes, or did you have to take a totally different tack to start offering ropes to people?
So one thing to realize is that the requirements for ropes for canyoneering are very, very different than pretty much any other rope in the world. I originally started with, your scrap climbing ropes, and they're really stretchy and they hold a lot of water. I have a friend who worked for Petzl, Hank Moon, who was also a caver. He used to work for PMI that used to carry Petzl, and he had a connection to these people in Canada he knew that had a rope factory and were cavers, and they made expedition ropes. So I got a couple boxes of their rope, and we tried that out, 100% polyester, and they worked pretty well. I tell you, if you want to do business with people from another country, Canada would probably be the first place to go to. At Black Diamond, I had a lot of experience on the side, meaning I wasn't the people that negotiated with the factories, but I got to be involved in these conversations, and most of the conversations were about how frustrating it was to try and work with these people from other countries that had a different ethic about how you deal with people.
Right, different holidays.
Well, and also Americans are pretty nice in business. For instance, if you call up someone in a company and you say, I'm trying to get a hold of this, they'll say, well, we don't really make that, but you should try this other company. I think they make that. And you go to them, they would go, well, we don't really sell to you, but here's our competitor who's really small and anxious right now. You should talk to them. In other countries, they don't do that.
They just say, nope, we don't do that, and then hang up.
Yeah.
That must be infuriating.
So I talked with them. We did a couple orders of ropes, and that was good. And then it was like, if we could do these with some color on them, because caving ropes are white, because the dye can go off and pollute the cave.
I never knew that.
They're very sensitive to that. And I sent them a letter and said, well, I think I can do this many ropes, but I would need it at this price. And this price is pretty low. And they basically said, yeah, we can do that. When would you like them? I expected to have to negotiate. And that has worked really well. The ropes are a big part of my business, and I think I make good ropes. I learned at Black Diamond that it's good to make some fancy products, but most people just want products that work. Call them blue-collar products. The bulk of Black Diamond's business was always in blue-collar products. You make the fancy stuff to be sure everyone knows that you're really cutting edge and everything. Right. My ropes are very much blue-collar rope. They're not very expensive, and they work pretty darn well for that.
And I can vouch for the ruggedness of your ropes. I think I mentioned this to you before when I decided to get into canyoneering regularly about 2011. And at that time, I was a climber and other things, and so I knew I needed static rope, and the only static rope I knew about was 11 mil PMI rope, which is heavy as hell and thick. I knew I needed to keep my stuff from getting wet, and the only backpacks I could find that would be useful for that were dry packs, which are basically huge dry bags, which are a pain in the ass. And then I don't remember how it came about. I'm wondering if what happened is I got your guidebook and then saw the Imlay ad in it. Somehow I found out about Imlay gear, and I was like, oh, someone makes gear specifically for canyoneering. Oh, you buy a pack that drains, and then you put dry bags inside it. This is a new idea. Oh, you buy a rope that's way thinner and goes inside a rope bag, and you don't have to coil it all the time. That was a huge change for me, and one of the first ropes I bought was a green 120-foot Canyonero, and I still have that rope. That rope still works 7 years later. It's a durable rope. So that was my free advertising for you. So let's talk about the gear. You go to Utah, you start exploring all these places, and you start realizing you need different gear. You leave Black Diamond, you break your back, all these other things happen, and you start this side business. So what were the things you started deciding you needed to design fresh that people needed that they just didn't have before?
Well, I think the first problem to confront was getting out of potholes. We have these bags called pot shots, which is a purse, and you fill it with sand, you tie a rope to it, and you throw it past the pothole, and you use that to climb the rope to get out of the pothole. So that was kind of the first good product. It's nice and simple. It only has 4 materials to it. Of course, I was making packs, and I tried a couple of different things. I remember specifically one pack I made I was really proud of. It was going to be great. I took it through one canyon and it was destroyed. Such to the point that at the end of the day, I was carrying the stuff in my arms.
So you don't sell that pack, obviously.
I learned what not to do. That's a very important thing in design, is you design things and you think they're going to be great, and then you learn, this doesn't work at all. But eventually figured out what it is that you need for carrying packs. And of course, there's a variety of canyons. We do these really thin canyons where you bring a very small pack, and then we do big canyons like Imlay or Heaps where you almost need an overnight pack. And so I'd build them for each of them. It's not like I'm doing this on my own, because canyoneering is a very big sport in Europe. Their canyons are very different than ours, but it's a very big sport there, and there's lots of companies making gear. So there's a lot of ideas that I took from European stuff and from Europeans that came and visited. A lot of the features that appear to be my own innovations on the packs are things I took from some of the brands in Europe. It's always kind of been my thing in design, is to pick up on ideas that other people have tried and see what's good about them and then develop it to a point where it works. I've always considered that one of my strengths as a designer. But, rope bags are kind of the big thing, because climbers don't use rope bags, but they're really important to canyoneering. Actually, I kind of consider people to make the transition to being a person that's done a couple canyons to being a canyoneer when they recognize that rope bags are what they really need and use them religiously. Mm-hmm. Then the packs are designed to be very rugged and simple, so they don't have gewgaws on them, which is kind of how the outdoor industry has gone.
They don't have ice axe loops.
No ice axe loops.
The only packs that don't have ice axe loops.
And they have a water tank pocket only under objection. Because water tanks don't really work when you're canyoneering, because when you stand on your pack in order to get through a constriction, the water tanks tend to burst or leak or stuff like that. And then they need to drain, which is kind of hard to figure out, because things that have holes in them tend not to be all that durable. So, we did a couple iterations on that and got to something that seems to work pretty well. We have 5 different sizes for more or less different size canyons, and some canyons you need to carry a lot of gear for, and some you really don't.
So let's talk about competition. Because around the time I found Imlay Canyon gear, I was like, oh, a place that sells canyon-specific gear. And as far as I could tell, there was almost no one else. But since then, other people have come and gone. All sorts of new descenders have appeared. All sorts of new packs have started making their way to the U.S. What has been the impact of that, positive and negative, for you?
Well, I think that goes back to the 2 years when I wasn't offering packs and rope bags, because I kind of gave an opportunity to someone, and a couple people stepped in there. I kind of have the advantage in that I'm a full-time canyoneer and also a full-time product designer. So even though I'm a reluctant businessman in a lot of ways, I have those advantages. And I have to tell you, I think if you start a business, you should start one where you don't have any competition. And the great thing is that the sport is small enough that the players in like the climbing industry or most outdoor industry, it's just not a big enough market for people to go into. Being at Black Diamond, I understood what made successful products, and there are none of my products that would be successful in the situation of Black Diamond because they're just not big enough. So it's been great. People come in with other things. European canyoneering is so different than what we do here in Utah. There is canyoneering that's much like European canyons in the Sierra Nevada, San Gabriel's up Pacific Northwest. But I've decided to make gear that works for the specific American canyoneering. Really, I'd like to get into the financial position where I could bring in European brands of vinyl packs that work for watery canyons. But I just never seem to have that extra 50,000 floating around.
Right.
Some people have made descenders. I played with descender models for a while. I reached the conclusion that it was a lot more complicated than it looks. My friend Todd in Las Vegas came up with the Critter, and he made that for a while. We're working on turning that over to me because he's not really in the canyoneering business. He's in the Las Vegas show, technical, Cirque du Soleil kind of stuff. And that business has done quite well recently, so he doesn't have time to make it anymore.
This was Todd of Canyon Works, right?
Yeah.
They were offering the Critter, and then they also had a competing rope bag, right? Which now has moved to Blue Water. Is that what happened?
Yeah. So during the recession, his main business kind of tanked. But one of the things is when you're running a sewing factory, the people that work for you that know how to sew are incredibly valuable. So he did a wise thing, which was he figured out something else that they can make for a while, even if he didn't make any money on it, to keep those people employed.
Right.
So he did run of packs. His rope bags, he did reasonably well on. And then when his business picked up again, when Las Vegas became a thing again, he sold that design to Blue Water to make. So they're making his rope bags. His packs were really too expensive to make. It's certainly too expensive to make in the U.S., and there's lots of European brands that would compete with those because they were more of a Euro blend between my packs and the European packs. I hate to say it, but it's kind of nice that he stepped in to fill the void there for a while, but I'm still fighting back to get that market share. And I see those rope bags around, and I'm like, ah.
By the way, I've seen you hold one before. As a matter of fact, Alden Anderson may have a photograph of you in Cascade and you're holding a Canyon Works bag.
With a look of disdain on my face, I hope.
I'm not sure. I think you were a bit surprised. So since this competition did come in during your nadir, have you then since made adjustments to any of your products because of things that you saw that were popular with the other products? Do you think it's affected your designs at all?
A little bit, but not very much. I have a fair degree of self-righteousness.
I've never seen any evidence of this.
In a way, I feel like I've been doing the right thing. The designs are good for most of what we do. You know, my designs are very specific to Utah canyoneering, and they work somewhere between okay and pretty good for other canyons. But people that do those canyons a lot sometimes complain about my gear and think I should be doing something else. My good friend Sonny came and said, well, you know, you really should make a pack that's like this, like the Rodcliffe pack that they use in Europe. You know, I told him there's 14 companies in Europe that are making that same pack. Mm-hmm. There's nobody in Europe that's making a pack anything like my packs. Again, it's great to be in a business without any direct competition.
Essentially what you're saying is you've recognized a niche market that's not being served, and people are trying to ask you to serve a market that is being served.
Yeah.
But you want to continue to serve the one that isn't served other than by your product.
I have a plan. It seems to be working. The only thing is that it still requires me to work.
See, when you can figure out how to stop doing that.
That's right. That's the ultimate goal. Still make lots of money, but not really have to work.
So speaking of working, other than running Imlay Canyon Gear and designing products for canyoneers, you are also a guide, correct?
I am a guide emeritus. I worked as a guide for a Zion Adventure Company for 5 years, very much part-time. I moved down to Mount Carmel next to Zion 12 years ago, and that's when I was living off credit cards. That first summer, I got an order about once a day, so it didn't really occupy my time very much. And I was thinking, boy, it sure would be nice to be making some money somewhere. So I signed up to guide with those guys and got trained as a guide. People might think that being a canyoneer guide is about canyoneering, but it's not. It's about people.
Right, yeah.
I had incredibly valuable training learning about people because I'm an engineer. I didn't really get any training on people before then.
Right. I think you're making a good point because I think a lot of people would assume, oh, you're being trained to be a canyoneer guide, so you need to know all these technical things. But most of what you're taking people through isn't that technical, but what you are dealing with is them being terrified of heights or being afraid to say they're afraid of something or trying to look good in front of their buddies or arguing with their spouse. And these are all the things you have to learn to deal with.
It's great because it's a selfless thing to be a good guide. Jonathan always talked about your day is successful if you come back and the people talk about what they did. And your day is unsuccessful if you come back and the people talk about what you did as the guide. This is a chance for people to step outside their comfort zone safely, take on new challenges, and succeed. That's what we're doing as canyon guides. Most of the people that do a guided canyon trip, that's the first and only time in their life that they will do that kind of a thing. There are some people that take a course or really like it and come back and do more, but most of those people are on vacation. I love taking families out because you're there with mom and pop and they get to step back and relax and have you manage their kids and give this great experience to their kids. One thing I learned about guiding with kids is mom and dad are always like 2 years behind their kids.
Right.
Whereas you put in a situation where the kids need to step up and be as mature as they can be, they can do that for 4 hours. They may not be able to do it for 8 hours, but they can act above their age for that time period and have a great time. And
Yeah, I'm sure you see a lot of people surprise themselves. They come in, they're afraid to do this task, they don't think they're going to be able to do it, and then by the end, they have this new sense of pride and this accomplishment that they were able to do a thing they maybe didn't think they were capable of.
that's one of the great things about guiding is that you get to be the catalyst for that. If you do your job well, there's this sense of professionalism and safety, and we work hard to keep them safe and give them the opportunity to really step out. Part of our guiding philosophy at ZAC is to stay out of the way as much as possible. You create this protective sphere and then you move out to the side, and the experience of the client is what's really the thing that's going on there.
And are you still doing guided trips to this day?
It's been 6 years since I've stopped actually guiding. I've done a couple special trips over the years, and I've stayed involved with Design Adventure Company as a mature person. One of the things that I offered the company when I first worked there is that most of the people working there were in their 20s, and this was their first real job. They didn't have a lot of experience in company meetings, in group meetings, group decision making. So I could come as someone who had worked at 4 or 5 different places with good experiences and bad experiences and understood how a company works together. And I fulfilled that role as a mentor for a while and kept that a little bit. But just like Black Diamond, the company has evolved. There's more of that maturity there than there was 10 years ago when I worked there.
So what do your days look like now? What's a day in the life of Tom Jones?
Well, it is important to come out and check on the chickens and check on the apple trees, knock some apples down. Very important to get on the Facebook. You know, there's lots of people on there that are wrong.
If there's one thing many people know about Tom Jones is he has a lot of opinions on Facebook.
But it's amazing how much bookkeeping is involved in a small company. I probably spend 2 hours a day just doing bookkeeping. That also involves ordering things. We have an order coming in from China that's finally on the floor being sewn right now. It's taken 6 months from sending them samples to the point where it's on the floor being sewn. The great thing about this company is they more or less ask a question every day, which to me means they're actually working on it. Whereas my previous experience with the same company is they would go for 2 months without asking any questions. And then I did have a friend who translated for me, and she would go talk to them and go, "What's going on?" And they go, "Well, we have this problem and we don't know how to solve it." And it's like, okay, you need to tell us. This is the thing about dealing with foreign businesses, that they have a different ethic. But I spent some time designing. There are some sewing projects that I do. We have some professional home sewers that I work with, correspond with them, and solve problems. The last year, I've spent a lot of time working on the designs. So that involves cutting patterns, figuring out how I want to solve a problem, making a sample, finding out that it kind of works but kind of doesn't work, making some changes, making another sample. I have spent a fair time in the sewing room this last year and a half or so, such that now I'm completely sick of sewing.
And so then when are you in Canyons?
I get out usually 2 or 3 days a week. I have a couple good regular partners here in Zion, and then I have friends who do week-long trips out here, so we can go out and go do things. I try and lead trips at rendezvous. I like doing canyons at rendezvous where I'm kind of a teacher, but we're also just doing the canyon. When you actually teach a course that people pay for, there's this enormous responsibility to get them as much, get them the stuff they need.
Get them their money's worth.
Whereas if you're teaching at a rendezvous, it's kind of like, oh, I give them some tips and show them how to do a couple of things.
Maybe patronize them a little bit.
Part of the thing about guiding is that when I was guiding, my other job was to sit here in front of the computer and type, put things in boxes and send them away. So there was zero social interaction involved in that. And then you go to guide, and the great thing about guiding is it's like a regular job. You clock in, you do your job, you clean up, you clock out. Money appears in your bank account. Great. Running your own business, you're doing that every day of the year, every hour. You wake up in the morning and you're thinking about, how do I solve this problem? What do I need to deal with today? Why did this thing happen? What can I do about it? You know, most people that run a guiding company, they have that problem. I really liked guiding and not running the company. It's like, I already have a company to run. I already have enough problems. I don't need more. I just want to go down there, interact with people, become their best friend in 4 hours, clean up and go home.
What should people expect from Imlay Canyon gear in the next few years? What's the plan?
Well, I feel like I finally have the packs and the pack company dialed and ready to go. I have a couple other products that I know I can make, and I'm picking up the Critter. But beyond that, it's hard to say. It's hard to say what innovations could come down the pike. The Fiddlestick is a great innovation for anchors out in the wild. Sand trap, great thing. I am at the point where I don't really see what other problems really need to be solved. The shoes are a mess, but I don't do shoes. If I tried to do shoes and failed, it would sink the company. Mm-hmm. The same is kind of true of wetsuits. There just isn't enough wetsuit business. And also, since canyoneers chew up wetsuits, they really don't want expensive ones. They want cheap ones. And there's millions of surfers who buy wetsuits. So those wetsuits are very reasonably priced. Not possible to compete with that.
So what is your descender of choice? Is it the Critter?
I'm pretty much on the Critter program these days. The Squirrel came out at pretty much the same time, and that was by my good friend Luke. The Squirrel is really good for a very specific thing, but I don't think it really works that well as a general descender. So I switched over to the Critter, and I've been selling them hand over fist, and I'm very disappointed. I was making a lot more money on them than Todd was. We're working on finding a home to make that on a regular basis. So I think that'll be mine. That'll be good. I'm having trouble seeing much beyond that. What I really want to work on is books, but I don't seem to be very good at doing that. At the moment, as you can see, sitting here in my backyard, I'm working on the second edition of the Zion book, which is kind of stalled out on my computer there. But I enjoy finishing books. There's a definition of a writer. You know what a writer is? A writer is someone for whom writing is more difficult than it is for ordinary people.
Speaking of your writing, that always reminds me of your beta in your book for, what is it, Lower Refrigerator Canyon or whatever, which is essentially, I did this one so you don't have to, and that's almost the entire beta in the book. So maybe we can look for more future gems like that in the revised edition.
The revised edition is continuing to be selective. I like to put in a few obvious canyons that are not worth doing, just so I can say that. I did do Grotto Canyon again, and I can confirm that you don't really need to do that one.
If people are interested in your products, or they're just interested in hearing Tom Jones share his opinions, where are the places people can go to either acquire your products or hear your many opinions?
Well, unfortunately, on Facebook, even my many very insightful, truthful opinions get lost in the great ocean of opinions on Facebook. My main empire source is canyoneeringusa.com. I'm a very active user on the Canyon Collective. Thankfully, my friend Ram helps me edit things, as in he gives me a call and says, Tom, why did you say that? You can't say that. You're being a dick.
How many times a day does he tell you this?
It's about once a week.
Oh, okay.
But it's been very good because I've learned to tone things down, or at least wait 2 hours before I respond.
And on Canyon Collective, you're Ratagonia, correct?
Yeah.
So if you look for that person, you will see immediately what he is talking about.
As a canyoneer, after a little while, you'll learn that everything I have to say is absolutely correct all the time.
Without a doubt. So Canyon Collective, canyoneeringusa.com. Are those all the places where people can get their fix of Tom Jones and your gear?
Well, I have the Imlay canyongear.com site, which I made in 2012 and has not been updated since then. I have a web designer who has been working on rebuilding that, who unfortunately got Lyme disease this summer, so he's been on the couch. The good news is I have no interest in coding web pages anymore. I did that for many years back in the days when it was much easier and simpler. I didn't keep up, and now I'm not even tempted to think about keeping up, which means things get kind of obsolete, but that's okay.
So usually here, before we wrap up the show, what I always ask people is if they have a final thought they want to leave people with, but what I think I'd rather have you do is reach back into your memory banks and let us end this show with one of your preferred stories from your early days in canyoneering. Just whatever the first one that comes to mind.
And how many hours do we have for this?
We have as many hours as you need. I have fresh batteries in here now. So just pluck something from the archives and take us out with a story from Tom Jones.
Well, I guess I would say my favorite story is the first canyon I ever did with Steve Ramras, who's been my best friend for 18 years. We ran into each other in the Escalante Visitor Center one time after I'd been out for a week, and my friend insisted that we go into the Visitor Center where there were a whole bunch of people that smelled funny and no, they smelled nice. We smelled funny. And this crazy homeless person came up and said, "Looks like you've been doing what we've been doing." And I just kind of gave him a sneer because I definitely did not want to be there. A couple months later, we hooked up for our first canyon together, which was a canyon called Shenanigans. It was one of my first real explorations. I scouted it a little bit, but obviously not enough. It turned out to be a fantastic canyon. It's very, very narrow, such that there are places where you take your helmet off.
Yeah, that's pretty narrow.
There's a long section where you can't turn your head around. And Ram was kind of heavy at that point. He kind of let himself go and was kind of big in the belly. He didn't fit. So me and Dave Black and Alicia Scotter ended up going through the canyon, and Ram brought two young fit guys from Colorado with him. They ended up going back up the canyon, which seemed crazy because it's a lot easier to go down these canyons than it is to go up. And there was a rappel in there, which they figured out how to get around. And this was in 1st of March, so the days were short and it was cold. Thankfully, it all worked out. Dave Black had to get back for his shift at the hospital, so he disappeared out the front. Me and Alicia walked out in the dark. Those guys got Ram out at the top and drove around and picked us up where we hiked out. Whew. Really dodged a bullet on that one. Actually, I would say one of the themes I look back on is that we dodged a lot of bullets. At every stage in our canyoneering development, we found canyons that were hard for us, but not too hard. Looking back on it, it's like some of the canyons we do now, if we had found those at the beginning, we would still be in there.
Right.
So I appreciate that the gods let us get away with this whole thing. It's been a great run. There's a great little movie out about Ram called One Trick Pony that you can see on danransom.com that epitomizes where me and Ram feel like we are at this moment. We've peaked and we're sliding down the other slope. The question is, how much can we hold on to? But, you know, I did a big canyon yesterday, and I'm tired, but I feel great. None of the physical difficulties I've had in this last 6 months are really manifesting themselves today, and that's a very optimistic thing for me, because I'm getting old, and that's the better choice over the other choice. But
now I'm also going to make you leave the audience with some final words. What's your final thought? What do you want to leave people with?
There's a problem in canyoneering that things like YouTube and various things on the internet make it look really simple. Even the simple thing like the subway, which has 3 short rappels and a couple swims and 12 miles of rugged hiking, is something that you need to actually know some stuff. Often people come into canyoneering without a climbing background. A climbing background helps. But people come into canyoneering and think it's easy. And sometimes it is easy, but a lot of times it's not. That's kind of the problem we see in the sport, is that there's still a proliferation of people with almost no skills that come and try and do stuff. Zion is a mess these days because the visitor level is twice what it was 5 years ago. And the park is just not set up for it. And the way the budgeting works for the park, they have the same budget they had 5 years ago. So there's a lot more rescues in the park that may or may not be canyoneers. There are people that pick out a hard canyon to do as their first canyon because it looks good. How hard could it be? Well, the answer is it can be really hard, and those people end up getting rescued. So if people want to do this, they should do it right. They should either hook up with some experienced people or take a class or go out with a guide and just have an experience with a guide. But this American thing of, oh, I'll figure it out when I get out there, that works until it doesn't work, and then bad things happen.
So don't let your ego get in the way. Get some training, find some people who know what they're doing, and then go have a good time.
Yeah.
And don't become other people's problem.
Yeah.
Those are the final words from Tom Jones.
There you go.
Thanks for sitting out in your yard with me, throwing sticks at trees. It's getting sunny, so it's time for us to end this show.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay,
Thanks again.
thank you.
And you all know what time it is. It is time now to run to our website, gogetoutside.com. Look for this, episode 77 with Tom Jones, and there you will find numerous photographs of Tom Jones himself in canyons. Links to all of the things we talked about in today's show, including the video One Trick Pony by Dan Ransom, sponsored by Imlay Canyon Gear. And if anything you heard today has inspired you to get in touch with us here at the show, then send us a message, go@butcherbirdstudios.com, or send us a voicemail, 818-925-0106, or if you hate speaking on a phone and you hate emailing and the only way you want to communicate is by text, you can also text us at that number, 818-925-0106. And if you would like to do us at the show a huge favor and really help us out, then run to your podcast purveyor of choice, subscribe to the show, rate it, review it, and share it with someone who wants to hear about Tom Jones. This episode of the Go Get Outside podcast was edited by Griffin Davis. It was produced and recorded with additional editing by me, your host, Jason Milligan. And as always, it was brought to you by Butcherbird Studios. Next time on the show, come back February 1st for adventure photographer and homeless van dweller Tiffany Nardico. See you then.